Hello friendos and randos, welcome back to another video. I just wanted to make a quick idea on what some of my thoughts are on the upcoming ban list and what I think is going to get hit and what I think should get hit. So of course, if you have been keeping up with the OP08 meta at all, let's just say the OP08 meta has been very dominated by a certain deck, and that deck is of course Red Purple Law. It's been putting up unprecedented results, even more than Sakazuki, arguably, when it was in its heyday. Of course, we can say that now with all of the data that we got over the past couple of months in OP08, and the tournament results definitely don't lie, and all of the major championships across not just Japan but also the rest of Asia. So here are of course some statistics that are taken from Noanyan as well as OP Hirata, showing you, for example, flagship wins as well as the overall championship topping as well as winning. And you can see, of course, well, yes, Red Purple Law has been winning a lot, and of course the other popular and I would say has some problematic cards in it deck is also the Black Lucci. So you're gonna see probably some hits to either of these leaders, and I wanted to just quickly talk about what hits I do expect to see for these leaders and some cards in their respective decks for August 12th. So let's start with Red Purple Law, of course. And I think Red Purple Law actually in 07 was actually pretty balanced, and I think the Western side of things are also kind of realizing that. It still has its inconsistencies, it's still not the strongest, it has weaknesses. You really need to see the different pieces. And it was that way at least until OP08. And with OP08, there are two new cards that make the deck really much more powerful. And of course, the first is the 3-cost Pudding, which replaced Ayin in most builds, or Zorojiro in those builds that ran it as well. And the other card that has really pushed Red Purple Law from like tier 1 into tier 0 category is definitely the Black Maria card. Black Maria, of course, I've made a video on it. I talked about how you may be using it wrong, how you're not getting the most out of it. But other than that, I think Black Maria is insanely powerful, and how you will know this is just by reading the card. Activate main once per turn, you can ramp up to 5 Rested Dawn, which is insane value. Like, it's really something that is unprecedented. And not only that, is allowed Red Purple Law builds to get even more greedy with their Dawn management. A lot of them have cut 5-cost Kit Blocker, they have cut Bond Clay, they have cut most forms of ramp outside of Black Maria. And you can see that this card has really made it very overtuned, because you can see in the later stages of the game, Red Purple Law having 10 Dawn to play with, which is very out of the ordinary in any meta before this. And it has really single-handedly fixed the problems the deck had with Dawn management and pushed it into a level where it's not acceptable in terms of how quickly it can ramp up, as well as how often you can use your leader effect without facing any repercussions. So this card is definitely the most likely to get a hit, in my opinion, when it comes to this deck moving forward. Now, I've also seen some people suggest a ban for the promo card Gordon, so that, you know, you can't run both Gordon and Race Max in the deck, because why can this deck run 8 of a particular card? I don't think it's that much of a problem. Personally, I feel even with 8 Gordons, the deck can still be inconsistent with withdrawing the Gordons to make its reduction and removal. But the more pressing evidence for why Gordon's probably not going to get hit is because they did print another Red Hair Pirates version of Gordon in OP09. So even if they hit it, it would just be so that, you know, you wouldn't be able to run 12, I guess, or something like that. I personally don't feel like they will be hitting Gordon. I feel like the creation of the OP09 version is just so that you have more options, that you don't have to run the promo card anymore. It's basically an effective reprint to make it so that you don't have to buy the Gordon promo, which is pretty expensive, definitely. At least in even the East, is about $15 per copy, which is quite expensive for a card in Asia. Last but not least, I think another important card that people have been calling for bans, although I don't 100% agree with, is the 4-cost Reiju. So I think for 4-cost Reiju, of course, being able to draw 2 cards is a very powerful ability, and this is the card that helps Arpilor maintain its gas, because it is a deck that plays 1 or 2 cards per turn, so your hand size is going down very quickly. So having Reiju, Queen as well are the only ways that you really get to maintain your hand size. I personally don't feel like Reiju was the big issue for this deck, because even in OP07, for example, even with Reiju, I don't feel like the deck was overtuned. I feel like it was strong and it had high roll potential, but other than that, it was just okay. I don't think hitting Reiju will be the right choice. I feel like it's a strong card, but it's also a necessity, especially for this deck to maintain a base level of strength. In OP07, I can tell you, if this deck didn't have Reiju, it would not have been tier 1. So it's definitely a card that I feel should remain. It's also a very, very good card in every other purple deck. So even decks like Foxy were using this card. And of course, Blue Purple Reiju, which the card was made for, is using the card as well. I don't feel like this card deserves a hit. Although it is strong, I think it is one of the few ways you can maintain card advantage in this game. And I would like them to actually print more drawing tools rather than removing the few tools that we have. So hopefully they only hit Black Maria. In my opinion, they shouldn't ban it, they should errata it, so that it only applies to either Animal Kingdom Pirates leaders, or they should choice restrict it so that you can't use both cards in the same deck. Just you can't use Black Maria in the Red Purple Law deck. I think that would make it much more fair. Not only that, is that it would make the balance a little bit better when it comes to pushing the other purple decks back in line. So I think decks like Purple Kaido, Red Purple Luffy, the new Black Purple Luffy would also really benefit from using this Black Maria card. So I hope they make that choice to either errata it or to choice restrict it. And then lastly, of course, I think there's also been clamoring for the ban of the leader itself. On one hand, I think the leader itself is very powerful. The effect is very generic, which means that yes, there are going to be cases where Bandai have to design cards around the leader effect being powerful. So it's kind of like a NL as well as a Nami situation when it comes to this the leader card. So it really limits design around 4 cost red and purple characters. So I understand why you would consider that. So it kind of like the Sakazuki effect, where the leader is just too powerful, they needed to ban the leader, make a new one, same color combo, but the effect was much weaker. I think it's also a viable option to do that. I feel like if they do make that change, that shouldn't be the only change they make in the ban list. I think there are a few other problematic cards that should be hit if you do hit RP Law. But we will talk about that in a bit. But personally, I am a fan of the leader itself, and especially in 07, I played it for the entire set. So I really do enjoy playing RP Law. So I hope that they don't end up hitting the leader. I hope that they instead choice restrict Black Maria, and I think that should be enough, because the reality of things is that in OP08, the reason RP Law decks can be so flexible as well as so strong is because of Black Maria. And it's also that by having Black Maria in the deck, a lot of them are able to just remove a lot of other ramp cards completely, and that is something that makes the deck building have a lot more space for cards like Rush Zoro, Reducer Law, 16 2k counters, things like that. So I really hope that the only hit is the choice restriction of Black Maria, and if not, then it will be an errata for Black Maria, and if not, then an outright ban for Black Maria. I don't think anything else is going to be the real problem for RP Law. Next, other than RP Law, like I mentioned earlier, that Lucci is also a problem, because like you can see, other than the RP Law, the most common leader that you will see topping is also Lucci. So there are a few cards that I think deserve a hit for Lucci, and I'm going to lay them out now. So first off, of course, everyone is complaining about Black 8 cost Moria. So we have Black Maria and we have Black Moria that are on the watch list. I think both very, very problematic cards. On one hand, Moria provides a lot of value for a card of this cost. Yes, it's 8 costs, but it also plays a 4 cost, it also plays a 2 cost, and the targets available for this are very, very strong. Similar to what we were talking about with limiting the card pool design, every card that is 4 cost or 2 cost or lower needs to consider, what if Moria were to use this card? You can see this in full display in Black Yellow Luffy, where 2 costs like the baby Aces, Sabos, and Luffys are brought back by Moria, and that causes a huge problem as well, making the deck very, very powerful. On one hand, I think Black should have a card similar to this in ability, where you are able to use cards from your trash, call them back onto the board. The problem I feel is that this card is overstated, and I feel that the card should have either been limited to what kind of cards it can pull out. Specifically, maybe it should have only been able to bring black cards from the trash, or some have also mentioned maybe it should have been locked to Thriller Bug, which I feel like is a bit weaker, quite significantly weaker. But I don't think the effect of Moria itself is the biggest problem. I feel like the real issue is that it is a 8 cost 9k. Not only is its effect very powerful, it has stats that make it difficult to remove for most decks, and it also hits into someone for 5k counter. Personally, if this card was 8 cost 7k, I think it would still be played in every black deck, because it is that powerful. So if they decide to hit Moria, which I don't believe they do, I think the only thing they should do is errata it to have 7k power instead. I feel like it makes it a lot less oppressive, even though it is still very powerful, but it still maintains the power that it should have, which is to use your trash in a very efficient way. I think while it is unfair that it can do that, at least by putting it down to that 7k power line, for one, when it attacks you, it hurts a lot less, you require a lot less counter out of it, and for two, it also makes it easier for decks like red decks that focus on power-based removal or increasing their leader's power to deal with it. So I think that should be the hit for Moria, if there is a hit at all to it. And of course, the next thing that people have been complaining about is of course the 4 cost Rebecca. I think 4 cost Rebecca is really, really powerful ever since 05 when it was printed. I think everyone remembers Rebecca Hina Lucci. The combo is very, very powerful, it's very strong. It really definitely traumatized a lot of people, myself included, when I was playing RG Law in 05. But I think it's also a very, very powerful card, and it's a card that should exist. Cards that actually give you value for having trash in black decks makes sense. I think the card makes sense. It's a powerful card, yes, but if you think about it, it's actually just a 1 cost blocker that plays 3 cost down as well. So end of the day, being able to recover cards from your trash is a good mechanic. I think it's something that should exist. I think Moria and Rebecca on their own, they are not a problem. Even when you use Moria and Rebecca together, they are not a problem. The real problem cards in Lucci for me are these two. Firstly, Lucci. I think Moria, Rebecca, Spend 9 Lucci is a combo that everyone has gotten hit by at least a couple of times, right? I'm so sick of seeing it as well. And the reason why this is a problematic combo for me is definitely because that, number one, it develops 3 bodies at once, including a blocker. I've always said that Lucci is overpowered. In the 05 video that I made regarding which is the strongest black card in OP05, I pointed out that Lucci is the problem. 1, it is a 4 cost 6k, so it has a vanilla stat line. Number 2, there is no objectively painful cost to use it. Bottoming 3 cards from the bottom of your trash does sound like a lot, but actually in the Lucci leader specifically, it is very rarely a very impactful cost. I feel like if this card had a discard cost or something like that, it would have been a lot more balanced. And lastly, the fact that it is a cheap form of removal and it removes 2 sides at once. Now, with black having a lot of access to efficient reduction sources, for example, Ice Age and now Tempest Kick, it makes it very easy to clear 2 things on board with only 5 or 6 Dawn, which is very, very, very powerful. And of course, that doesn't even include the other problem card that I will be talking about in a little bit, which is of course Enies Lobby. I think it's also a problematic card, but we will talk about Lucci first. So the reason why I think the hit should be Lucci and not Spendine is because I think Spendine is actually a very healthy card for the game. I think it's interesting. It makes the possibility of playing things like Moria, Rebecca, Spendine, it makes a lot of fun plays, a lot of interesting outs to situations where you may not have outs before. I think Spendine itself is fine. I know people have been clamoring for Spendine to be hit instead, but I think the issue is, rather than Spendine being a problem, is that 4 cost Lucci is a problem. In the past, when you were doing Moria, Lucci, Helmeppo or something like that, I feel like that is fairly balanced. I feel like it removes board, yes, you can remove 2 things on the board, sure. Or if you played Moria, Rebecca, Brook, okay, I clear 1 thing and I have a blocker. The reason why this card is oppressive is because you go Moria, Rebecca, Helmeppo, Spendine, Lucci. On your 8 on turn, you can build 5 characters at once, and not only that, you can clear 2 of your opponent's characters at once. Of course, with the combination of your leader effect, your stage, and other reducing cards. Let me paint a picture for you where Lucci doesn't exist, and maybe they print a 5 cost card instead. A 5 cost Rob Lucci card. 5 cost 6k, maybe you can give it 1k counter, and it does clear 2 cards at once, maybe at the cost of a discard, something like that. This means that it's no longer playable off of Moria, which means that when you play Moria, you are choosing to clear 1 thing. I think the reason why cards that clear two things at once are not fair is because they are paying 1 for 2. In this case, 1 for 2 is really, really powerful. In a game like One Piece where tempo, board are all very, very, very important, having something like that is not super healthy. Let's look at some other examples for cards that clear two things at once. 8 cost Sabo, which I think is a very, very balanced card. I think it's very fair and it's strong. You discard a card and you clear a 5 cost and a 3 cost. I think this is very reasonable of a cost for something to clear two things. More examples. 6 cost Creek. This is a pretty good card. It has a few too many restrictions. I think that if it was 6 cost, discard 1 card, you can clear a 5 and a 4 rested, or you can clear 2 4s, or you can clear 2 3s, or a 4 and a 3, something like that. That will also be pretty reasonable, because you do have to discard 1 card from hand. Some of that card's power budget also goes into the double attack effect. 6 cost Sabo. On play, you can KO up to 2 characters with a combined power of 4k. So similarly, it also hits 2 different characters, and you also do have to use a reducer to hit meaningful things, but it has an interesting effect where you can combine the cost or combine the total power. Something like this is fairly balanced. I think it's, of course, that's why the card is not being played, because it is not good enough. But I think for something that should KO 2 things, there is definitely a sweet spot in between. I think the one issue with Lucci is that it's a 4 cost character, meaning that it's playable off of Moria, it's playable off of Spendine, and it's fairly cheap. So you can do things like Rebecca Hina Lucci, of course, for 8 Dawn only, which leaves you 2 Dawn to use more reducing cards. I think a card that KOs 2 things should be somewhere closer to that higher cost range. So if they either errata Lucci to be a 5 cost character, I think that would make it very, very good as well, because it will be a lot more balanced and lines it up with the 5 cost Kaku as well in terms of the slot, and it's still usable off of Air Door, which means if you're going to play that kind of variation of Lucci, I think that's very good as well. So my opinion is, of all of these 3 cards, I would actually say Lucci is the card that would deserve to hit a bit more. Whether a ban is fair or not, I don't really know. Maybe I'm biased as someone that plays decks like RG Law, RP Law, Zoro, Reiju, decks that tend to flood a little bit more. But personally, I feel that something that clears 2 things should just cost a little bit more. So if there is an errata to this card, I feel like it should become 5 cost instead. And I think that is enough for me to think it is balanced, right? Because that removes the Spendine playability, and it also makes it also removes the Moria playability. Now, last but not least, I think Enies Lobby. Enies Lobby has been a kind of controversial card in OP08 because of how much value it provides. I think Great Eruption was received a ban because it provided a free -2 essentially. Because you paid 1, you were able to -2, and you also got the card back in hand. So back in OP02, when Black was first released, their identity was very clear. To clear something, you play a board and then you discard 1 card from hand. So you look at cards like Kobe, like Sakazuki. After that, they developed a little bit more. You look at cards like 5 cost Kaku. Instead of discarding a card from hand, you bottom deck 2 cards from trash. That is what the initial identity of Black was, and back then it wasn't good enough, which is why they've started printing more and more powerful cards for Black. Case in point, 7 cost Jack, 9 cost Kaido, both are very, very powerful individual cards, but all of them are all overshadowed by 8 cost Moria existing. Actually, Black has a huge amount of playable boss monsters and cards, very good options for removal. It's just that the current cards are so powerful there's no point playing anything else. And another reason Enies Lobby is so powerful is because you are able to get -2 every turn for free. -2 every turn for free. Great Eruption was banned because it was -2 and drew you a card. So you paid 1, but you didn't lose hand, and you also were able to reduce. Enies Lobby is able to -2 every turn for free. There's no Dawn cost. There is no minus hand. It is a stage. There is no way to interact with it, except for very, very specific cards that are only in Black. So that's why this card is very, very problematic. It's only usable in 2 leaders at the moment, CP0 Lucci and CP9 Lucci. And I feel like this, it makes the most logical sense to hit, because it makes Lucci a lot weaker when it comes to removal. It also makes the deck a bit more fair. This way, I'm assuming if you were to cut Enies Lobby from a Lucci deck, you would probably replace it with Ice Age, Soap Ship, or other kinds of reduction, which make it a lot more balanced, I feel. The one reason Lucci is very frustrating to play against is because your board never gets to stick, as long as they have the stage on board. by removing the stage, they have to work a lot harder to remove your things. They have to burn more hand cards, they have to burn more Dawn. If they don't have the necessary reducer, then suddenly hitting your cards are a lot harder. Other than that, maybe they have to change their deck builds to fit in cards like 6 cost Sakazuki, 6 cost Brook that have their various weaknesses, such as having to discard a card, hitting a lower cost, having a lower power, things like that. But because the stage is so efficient, you can see 4 cost Lucci being very powerful, Kaku is very powerful, even Who's Who is very, very good as well. So if there are any hits to the Black Lucci deck, personally, I feel that Moria and Rebecca should stay. If they hit Moria, I hope they don't ban it. I hope they just hit it with a power reduction, and then they hit another card in tandem with it. But personally, I feel Moria and Rebecca can stay. If anything, it's these 2 cards that I want to receive some form of errata or ban. Enies Lobby, of course, I think a straight up ban is fair. If not, then I think if it were -1 cost, like Marineford, I think it will also be a lot more fair. And for the 4 cost Lucci, I think it shouldn't be 4 cost. I think they should probably either make it a 5 cost character, and I don't even mind if they make it 5 cost 6k but 1k guard. They should either make it 5/6, or they should make it have a cost, like discarding 1 card. I think either of those changes will make the Lucci deck a lot more fair and balanced to play around. But personally, of course, I think what I would do if I were Bandai is just to hit Enies Lobby and then see how things go from there. And then if anything else is a bit more problematic, then we can make any further changes. My personal wish list for the ban on August 12th is going to be these 2 cards. I hope that they either outright ban or they choice restrict Black Maria, and I also hope that they outright ban Enies Lobby, and I think that will make the meta shift significantly already. I think with the new starter decks coming out, I've been personally playing Mako Leader. I think it's pretty powerful as well. I've posted some of my results on Twitter, and I do aim to continue playing the deck. Blue Doflamingo starter deck has been very good for the meta as well. It has kind of boosted that deck very powerfully, and it's also made Boa Hancock reasonably stronger as well. So you've been seeing some results from those decks, and with more different decks coming out, you can also see decks that are built to counter these specific decks. So one example is the Vegapunk deck that won 4th in the recent championship in Japan. I believe that deck has a really good matchup into Doflamingo, and it is probably decent into RP Law as well, which is why it has probably seen results that day. Personally, I've been not the biggest fan of the OP08 meta. Although I did enjoy playing RP Law, I feel like the mirror is something that's really unfun to play, and it's also not the greatest in terms of consistency. Being able to enjoy the matches personally is not as fun for me. I hope if they do make the hits to RP Law, things like the new 1 cost Trafalgar Law Searcher for OP09, which hits 2 costs or higher characters that are Hard Pirates or Straw Hat, would give a little bit more consistency to the deck and make it a bit more fun to play. Other than that, I think Lucci without Enies Lobby does also struggle into some of the decks, and I think the main issue is that Lucci feels so different with and without Enies Lobby. I think to make the playlines a bit more consistent, to make them more enjoyable for everyone, Enies Lobby should probably take the hit. And if not, then I think the other card that can take the hit is 4 cost Lucci. That being said, that's my thoughts. We will see how accurate I was very, very shortly. I'm really looking forward to the ban list. I think the OP08 meta has not been the best, especially coming off of OP07 where the meta was very, very diverse. And I think the Western side of things are also experiencing how diverse 07 is right now. You can see, I think there was a tournament where all 8 of the top 8 decks were different leaders, which is amazing. Like it's such a good meta when things like that happens, and I really, really enjoy that kind of meta personally. And we haven't had that kind of meta since OP04. So I really, really hope that this ban list really makes an impact on the meta moving into OP09. And that's my hopes. And that's basically it for now. Thank you, friendos and randos, for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys again next time. Peace out.